The Federal and Velevin Hypermarket jointly present the Thoothukudi Marathon 2024 to raise awareness on drug abuse. The event is co-presented by Edison Cardio Care Center, Tiruchendur, powered by L. Anand Jewelry and St. Mother Teresa Engineering College, Thoothukudi.
Hello and welcome to the Federal. The Supreme Court last week upheld the powers of state governments to subcategorize Dalits. Now, what does this essentially mean? Basically, the Supreme Court has said that if a state government wants to classify subcastes among the Dalits and then apportion part of the reservations meant for Dalits for them and give them greater benefits than other Dalit communities, then the state governments have a right to do so. This is a landmark judgment. It's a judgment by a seven-member constitution bench of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has, of course, also put a very important condition on how this subcategorization can be done and what needs to be done before this subcategorization is allowed. And that condition is that state governments will require empirical data, proper quantifiable data to subcategorize the Dalit communities. It's one of the most consequential judgments of the Supreme Court, or so many believe, both among those who have welcomed the judgment as well as those who criticize the judgment. Now, consequential for what reasons? There are, as per the 2011 census, the last census of India, roughly 17% of India's population consists of Dalits, the scheduled castes. Under the current reservation scheme, Dalits are given 15% reservation within the reservation pie. Of course, different states have different caps on reservation. The Supreme Court mandated cap is 50%, that states cannot exceed 50%. That has, of course, been breached in certain cases. Tamil Nadu is one of the prime examples. And then above that 50%, which is meant to be distributed among the scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and the backward classes, above that 50%, the Supreme Court had also upheld the center's decision to give 10% reservation to what are called the EWS, or the economically weaker sections. So why the OBCs, why the Dalits or the SCs have been kind of marked out for this judgment? This was a judgment that has come in reference to an appeal against a previous judgment by of the Supreme Court, in which the decision to allow subcategorization had been turned down by the Supreme Court, and there was an appeal. Now, the Supreme Court has, as I said, held that the state governments have the power to subcategorize. I mentioned that this is one of the most consequential judgments in terms of social justice. The reasons for it, whether for the right causes or the wrong causes, is of course still open to interpretation by stakeholders in this, stakeholders on the judgment. But then there are, in this situation of the consequences of this judgment, the most important possibly is the political and the social implications of it. Politically, it's interesting that a judgment as consequential as this has not so far, this judgment had come almost a week ago, but so far we haven't seen two of the largest political parties, the Congress party from the opposition and the ruling BJP, come out with any detailed statement on how they view this judgment. There have been reactions from both ends of the political spectrum, the Treasury benches and the opposition, but by other parties aside from the Congress and and not from the Congress or the BJP. And by all indications, the reactions have been vastly polarized. There are parties which have welcomed the judgment. Within the Congress, at least two chief ministers of the Congress party, Mr. Revant Reddy from Telangana, Mr. Siddaramaiah from Karnataka, have welcomed the decision. Mr. Revant Reddy went to the extent of saying that Telangana government will be the first government to implement subcategorization of scheduled castes. But the Congress as a whole officially has not given its reaction, except for saying that the judgment vindicates and endorses the opposition, the India bloc's demands for a caste census. Why is it saying so? Because the Supreme Court has said that before subcategorization, empirical data needs to be available. And the opposition believes that the only way in which you will have empirical data is if you go in for a caste census. As I mentioned, and just to clarify that yes, we know as per the 2011 census that there are roughly 17% Dalits in the country, scheduled castes in the country. But then subcategorization would also mean that this 17% needs to be broken down into how many or what percentage of which caste of Dalits comprise what percentage of population. So the opposition believes that the only way of doing this is if you have a caste census backed by socioeconomic data. So a socioeconomic and caste census. The reason for the socioeconomic enumeration is to tell you or to tell the people that which castes have been left behind in terms of their development, their progress, and what needs to be done for them to bring them at par with other communities, other castes. The political ramifications of this are going to be very significant. Of course, right now, Parliament is in session, but this is the session in which the Parliament is discussing the budget. And so the budget has sort of taken priority over other discussions. But political parties across the board say that once the discussions over the budget are done, this issue, this judgment, may take center stage of discussions, of political discussions, both inside and outside Parliament. I said that there were polarizing views. Just to give you an example, I mentioned how the Telangana and the Karnataka Chief Minister have welcomed the judgment. The Bihar Chief Minister, Mr. Nitish Kumar, who has been batting for subcategorization, and Bihar, of course, was one of the first states in the country where you had a subcategorization for reservation that was granted long back by the late Karpuri Thakur, and who came up with this categorization of Mahadalits and the extremely backward classes and the Mahadalits. And so you've seen Mr. Nitish Kumar welcome this decision, but then within Mr. Nitish Kumar's formation, or the formation that he's part of, the NDA, within his state and nationally, there are differing opinions. Mr. Nitish Kumar's ally, or the BJP's ally, Mr. Chirag Paswan, has opposed it. He has said that his party is going to file a petition in the Supreme Court seeking a review of this judgment. They're going to challenge this judgment. Mr. Jitan Ram Manjhi, who's also an ally, who also, like Mr. Chirag Paswan, comes from a scheduled caste community, has said that the judgment is perfectly fine. It does not need to be reviewed. It needs to be implemented forthwith. The left parties have welcomed it. The left parties, of course, are constituents of the India bloc. But India bloc party, RJD, Mr. Lalu Yadav and Mr. Tejashwi Yadav's party, as well as the Samajwadi party of Akhilesh Yadav, have not welcomed the judgment. The two major Dalit voices, Dalit political voices in the country, the BSP chief Mayawati and the newly elected Lok Sabha MP from Nagina in UP, Mr. Chandrasekhar Azad of the Azad Samaj Party, have criticized the judgment heavily. Now let us examine the two points of view here. Those welcoming the judgment say that this is going to help, subcategorization will help create a more egalitarian system. The Dalits who've been left behind in the progress story will be brought at par, not just with forward classes or forward communities, but even among the Dalits, the other subcastes of the Dalits who've perhaps over the last 70 years gone ahead because they were able to get a better share because of their numbers, their numerical strength, or their political leadership, better share of the affirmative action pie. And so this is necessary to bring other communities among the Dalits who've been left behind at par. That's the basic argument in favor of it. What is the argument against it? Those against it believe, and there has been considerable amount of discussion on this by various political parties who are opposed to the judgment, who believe that this is going to create divisions within the scheduled caste community. Mr. Lalu Yadav's party, the RJD, has gone to the extent of saying that this is one of the most divisive judgments that has come out of the Supreme Court in the recent times. Similar reactions have come from Mayawati, from Chandrasekhar Azad. Why are they saying this is divisive? One, they think that politically and socially, the Dalits need to bandy together. They need to stick together if they have any chance of getting their voices heard. If they are divided because of a judgment like this, which pits one Dalit community against the other in terms of the reservation pie, then they don't really stand a chance of getting their voices heard. And a natural advantage, political and social advantage for this would go to those communities which have traditionally, or those political parties also, who have traditionally opposed reservations, opposed the welfare of the scheduled caste communities. The other complication that this judgment throws up is that once you have subcategorization, if states, lock, stock and barrel, go in for subcategorization and accept the Supreme Court's judgment for what it is, there may be calls for subcategorization among tribals, and more importantly, subcategorization among the backward classes who are much larger in number compared to even the Dalits, or even the Dalits and the tribals put together. The tribals, as per the 2011 census, are just about 9% of the country's population. So 9% of that, of the tribals, and roughly 17% of the scheduled castes. Of course, there are voices who say that these are figures that are as per the 2011 census. We did not have a census in 2021. The government has still not committed to when it will start having a census. And so people believe that these figures, the 2011 figures, would vastly be changed by now. And in the 15 years past, the Dalit population may have actually from 17% gone up to 22, 23, some even say 25%. Similarly, some say that the tribal population may have gone up to 11, 12, or 13%. The backward classes, there are various estimates because there is no caste census or no counting of backward communities when the census is conducted. But rough estimates say that aside from 17 plus 9 of the tribals and the Dalits, there are nearly 50% or over 50%, some even say 60% of backward classes. And so you have to then look at a reservation scheme that is subcategorized based on Dalits, subcategorized for the tribals, subcategorized for the OBCs. Politically, most people in the India bloc believe that while this judgment strengthens the call for a caste census, the judgment per se, because it brings in a degree of economic prosperity of a caste, because that is how you're going to reduce the percentage of certain Dalit communities and give more representation or benefits to the more backward of these Dalit communities. So a lot of them say that, you're basically going to break away from the constitutional mandate of reservation being granted based on historical backwardness, historical oppression, and take it to economic backwardness, which is a more recent construct, of course, upheld by the Supreme Court in the EWS quota case. And so it is not constitutionally prudent to do this. There are fears, since the BJP has in the past and the RSS has in the past batted for economic quota or revision of quota based on economic backwardness. There are people who are saying, the critics of the judgment, who believe that this is a kind of backdoor validation or a backdoor thumbs up to the BJP to take away the reservation system from the current yardstick of economic backwardness only on the yardstick of economic backwardness and not social or historic backwardness and oppression. And they also fear that this is going to break up the possibility of a consolidated Dalit leadership. You may have a Paswan leader here or a Jatav leader there, but you will not have leadership amongst the Dalits like you have a Hindu leadership in Mr. Narendra Modi. And that might help the BJP consolidate the smaller Dalit communities, not on the grounds of their Dalit identity or on the causes of the Dalit population, but or the welfare of the Dalit population, but purely on grounds of Hindutva, Hinduism, Hindu identity. We've seen how the voting patterns in 2014 and 2019 showed that there was a consolidation for the BJP among the Dalits and the tribals, largely on the Hindu identity question. And so that is something that the India bloc parties also fear. But as I said, it's not going to be as easy for the BJP either, because even among the BJP's allies, there is no unanimity on whether the judgment should be implemented as is, should be challenged, should be reversed. There are also voices that since Parliament is in session and the government, once the business of the budget is over, would do well to actually bring in a law to reverse the effects of this judgment. There are also calls for that. So it is, of course, a very, very polarizing subject, and we haven't heard the last of it. This is going to, a lot of people suspect, take center stage once the current discussions, the political discussions around the budget and other political developments of current political developments take a back seat. There are, of course, several assembly elections that are due over the course of the next 6 to 8 months. And a lot of these states have substantial population of Dalits, Maharashtra being one of them, and also tribals such as Jharkhand. And so whether this also ends up being a political issue during an electoral issue remains to be seen. But for now, this is going to be an issue that will be very keenly observed. There are voices in support and against the judgment of the Supreme Court. How this pans out, one will have to wait and see. But what is certain is that for the India bloc, the silver lining here is that this is going to strengthen the calls for a caste census, a demand that the BJP is unwilling to yield to, and something that had a huge bearing on how the results panned out for them in the Lok Sabha elections. The caste census was a very prominent plank of the India bloc. Mr. Rahul Gandhi, the new leader of opposition in the Lok Sabha, has repeatedly asserted for the need of a caste census even during the budget discussion in Parliament. And so there are going to be major calls for this as we move forward. But whether it's going to be a very easy topic for the India bloc to unanimously tackle is also on the test, because we've seen different voices from within the coalition, the India coalition, as we've seen from the NDA coalition. But for the India bloc, the bigger problem is how to explain to the Dalits, to the backward castes, to the tribals that subcategorization is good for them or is not good for them. But this is going to be a very interesting development to that will unfold in not a very quick way, but something that could also lead to a lot of political unrest as we proceed.
The Federal and Velevin Hypermarket jointly present the Thoothukudi Marathon 2024 to raise awareness on drug abuse. The event is co-presented by Edison Cardio Care Center, Tiruchendur, powered by L. Anand Jewelry and Saint Mother Teresa Engineering College, Thoothukudi.